Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're going to be discussing the possibility of what if 2022 was a historical red wave. Now, there were states that did experience a red wave: California, Florida, New York, specifically those states, and that has to do with the fact that those states' GOPs decided to use ballot harvesting and, you know, utilize early voting to the fullest, placing drop boxes near areas where they would get GOP-minded voters. They did that, and we saw the results there. Of course, they're the only states, with the exceptions of Alabama and Arkansas as well, and maybe a few more, but we'll get to those in this video. So those states that were affected by the red wave, they're not being touched. And I'm also not touching Alaska, that's cancer. But we're gonna go through all these states and see where the underperformances were, and the over performances, or, even performers. So typically it was an R+3 national environment, so you should be seeing a shift to the right of 8 points around that area. Here in Alabama, you see that the wave hit Alabama. That would stay around a 36-point win for the Republicans. Like we said, I'm not touching Alaska. That's too much math. Arizona, we saw a shift to the left in the state. So, and now, if every single state was an historical wave, just like Florida, every single state, the national GOP was enforcing drop boxes and ballot harvesting and all that fun stuff, then we'll probably not see an R+8 national environment. We're probably looking at an R+11 national environment, because that means you're getting a lot of rural voters to vote that typically don't. And the fact that Democrat turnout was low, um, in the states where the red wave was very high, so that's going to have a national effect. We're going to see rapid growth in GOP turnout to that of Democrat or GOP. It's a Dem vote. So an R+11 national environment would still be here, and of course the underperformances are still being accounted to. We're pretty much just shifting each of these states 8 points to the right, and we got a D+5 race here. You're probably looking at an R+2 race in Arizona. Blake Masters narrowly flips Arizona. Arkansas, that's another place the red wave hit. You're probably looking at the same exact result. California, that's another state that was affected by the red wave. Colorado was not hit by the red wave on any level, and we're taking a look at a D+16 state race in Colorado. We're probably looking at a D+8 in a historical wave. So Joe Day wouldn't have won even if the wave hit Colorado. Connecticut, another state the wave didn't hit. We're taking a look at a D+15 race. Let's see, where's my phone? So we're 8 points. I think that is, yeah, 7. That's 7. So Connecticut would have been competitive on if the wave hit Connecticut and a congressional seat would flip, and we'll get to that here in a second. I've got every single congressional race that was 7 points or less that went for the Dems by 7 points or less going to the GOP. I've got an entire list, and Colorado would have been competitive. We're not touching Florida. That's pretty much the state we're basing this off of. 16 points, to the right of the national, yada yada yada. Georgia, Herschel Walker would have won outright. He would have won by like 6 or 7 points. He probably would have avoided a runoff regardless. Done very well. You probably see higher turnout among rural blacks here in southwestern Georgia, and probably maxing out in the rural areas as well. So again, Walker probably avoids one off. Schatz probably still outperforms the Biden's numbers. Look at that. Idaho, that's a state the environment did not touch, or the wave touched, and of course it's you can't notice that, but they're both, the Senate and gubernatorial races were affected by a strong third party. Illinois, we're D+15. We're probably looking at a competitive Illinois as well, same margin as Connecticut. Indiana, the wave did not touch Indiana, despite what this map says. Young barely outperformed Trump when he was supposed to do at least 8 points better, and he didn't. But this race stays safe. Grassley probably does a lot better. Probably goes from 13 to 25 points in a victory. Maybe he wins every county but Polk, as per tradition. Kansas wasn't affected, but Morin would still win safe. Rand Paul would still win safe, however, he underperformed. Kennedy actually ran evens. Louisiana was a place the wave hit. Maryland, Biden spent a lot of time in Maryland, so that is a good reason as to why Maryland wasn't hit with the wave. So if it was hit with the wave, it would flip. They uh, even Maryland's 6th district still wouldn't flip if we shifted every race 8 points to the right from 2022. That's just how blue Maryland is. So Chet Holland still wins safe. Schmidt, he does a lot better than 13, probably a 25-point victory out of Missouri. Oh boy. So if rural voters did turn out, we'd probably be looking at a Senator Laxalt as well. He probably ends up winning by around 6 to 7 points out of the state of Nevada, which a big victory over Catherine Cortez Masto. Maggie Hassan, this is a D+9 victory. Hassan would probably still win by a point, maybe tilt margin. I'll say lean D for now. Hassan would have beaten Bulldog. He was DOA. That proves it. Not touching the New York Senate race. That was already affected by the red wave. North Carolina, massive underperformance of the Republicans in North Carolina on all the levels. We'd probably be looking at a safe R North Carolina in the Senate level. North Dakota, really, well, it really can't say anything. It was affected by the red wave. The Democrat only got 25%. The right-wing vote got over 70%. But yeah, so we're not touching North Dakota. Ohio, we're looking at a safe R Ohio if we shift this state 8 points to the right, which gives us R plus 15. Both Oklahoma seats, Mullen and Langford would have done better. Then would have done 8 points better, but still safe R, so there's no point in talking about it. Ron Wyden, Jesus Christ, this guy is an outperformer among outperformers. He ended up beating Joey Perkins by 14. We're probably looking at uh, likely D Oregon, about a 6-point victory for Ron Wyden, which is still an outperformance of an R plus 11 national environment anyway. So next up, Pennsylvania. Fetterman won by 5 points. That's been up last I checked. That's 2 points up. So Oz would have won by 2 instead of what I originally thought because it went up. Fetterman's lead went up by a lot. So Oz would have beaten Fetterman by 2. So again, a lot of Fetterman voters voted for Fetterman pre-debates, though they probably still would have voted for him. Again, even though it's an R plus 11 national environment, you still got to remember that Republicans ran terrible candidates, and it's really going to have effect. South Carolina, Tim Scott would outperform, would still do better if the national environment hit. South Carolina was a state that it didn't hit, is what I'm trying to say. South Dakota, that's a state that was affected by the wave. Utah, that state was not affected by the wave. 15 or 11-point victory for Lee. He probably would have won by 19 this time around. Vermont, ooh, they finally have the county map. It looks beautiful. The colors, I mean, like it actually looks pretty like satisfying. Uh, Malloy might have won Essex, but Welch will still beat the shit out of him. Okay, so a 15-point victory for the Democrats in Washington. If the wave would have affected it, we're probably looking at likely D Washington as well. D plus 7, D plus 8. Wisconsin, Johnson would have won by 9, close to safe, but not quite there. And so the final Senate map would be Republicans flipping Nevada, Georgia, and Arizona. So those 3 seats Republicans would have gotten their 53 Senate seats, full stop, and they would have made Washington, Oregon, Illinois, and Connecticut competitive. Now we head to the governor's map. Hold on. Oh well, fuck it, I don't care. Now we do the governor's maps. Again, Alabama, we're not touching it. It was already affected by the wave. Alaska, not touching it. That's way too much math. Arizona, so I'm gonna say This is going to be a lake victory by the end of the day if Arizona was affected by the wave. A 7 to 8 or 6 to 7 point victory for Lake out of Arizona. Arkansas was already touched by the wave. California, again, already touched by the wave, so there's no need there. Colorado, okay, so this is a 19-point win. Jared Polis would still win by safe margin. Connecticut would have been lean D, would have been probably the same result as in 2018. However, Lamont still would have won by 3 to 4 points. Florida, again, we're basing this whole R+11 national environment off of Florida, and DeSantis would still win. Kemp would win safe. Easy. Let's see. Let me do the math here, see if it would be competitive. No, it would not be. Green would still win by double digits, but it'd be one of the closest elections in Hawaii's governor race. It'd be a lot more competitive than a typical race. Idaho, Brad Little would win would win safe. Illinois, a 12-point win. This would be lane D. Pritzker would win by 4 around there anyway. It'd be really competitive governor race. Iowa, Reynolds would have a much larger victory in the state. Kansas, Schmidt would have actually won. He would have won by 5 to 6 points at the end of the day. He would have beaten Laura Kelly. But again, the wave did not hit. Maine, another state. Mills would win by around 5 to 6 points. It would be a likely margin. Still be a pretty devastating victory for Paula Page. 32 points. It would shift to the right a little bit, but Westmore still winning by a safe margin. Massachusetts, 29 points. We'd still see a safe victory for Healy out of that state. 11 points for Whitmer. Whitmer still winning just by a much narrower margin, around 2 to 3 percentage points. It'd be to the left of Illinois still. But Whitmer would stay as governor, but we probably have a Republican legislature there. This one, Minnesota would be one of the more closer elections. It'd narrowly go to Tim Walz. He'd win by a tilt margin, and, it would, be a sweat. It would be like, oh, thank Jesus Christ for the Democrats, because Republicans would have terraformed Minnesota into a red state if Scott Jensen would have won. That state should have been talked about more than it did, because like Republicans already had the legislature control, and if Scott Jensen won, then terraforming could have began. Nebraska, that stays red. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the wave did affect Nebraska. Nevada, Lombardo would have won by around 8 or 9 points, close to safe. Probably would have flipped Clark County. Sununu would have still won by a safe margin. New Mexico, this Ron Shetty would have actually won. Like, he would have barely won. I think it would be super close, but with the wave not affecting New Mexico and causing Harrell to lose because Republicans had a terrible campaigning strategy. Hopefully they change that. But Ron Shetty would narrowly beat out Grisham. New York, we're not going to touch. It was already affected by the wave. Ohio, DeWine would just have a much larger victory than he already did. Stitz, again, it was already safe. It'd just be a much deeper shade of red. Oregon, it would go to Drazen. Drazen would win by around 2 or 3 points. Drazen would have beaten out Kotek. Josh Shapiro, he won by 15 over good old Dougie, but he'd still win by a very, very large margin. He would have won by 7 points over Doug Mastriano, because Doug Mastriano's dirt, pretty much. He's a stain on the party. Dan McKee still would have won safe. It would have been like an 11 or 12-point victory out of Rhode Island. McMaster's would have had a much larger victory, probably 26 points. Probably would have flipped Myrtle Beach down here. I think that's Myrtle Beach, that county. Chrissy Nome would have a much larger win. Bill Lee would have had a much larger win. Abbott, safe, just a deeper shade. We don't even talk about Phil Scott. It's already deep enough red as it is. Mickles would have narrowly beaten out Evers. It would have been like a 3 to 4 point victory. It'd be a lot closer than it should have been, and that's because Tim Mickles ran a terrible campaign, and he's known for this. For some reason, a lot of good Republican candidates just end up being terrible campaigners. But yeah, but yeah, that's all the Republican races. The Republicans would have gained about 4 seats. For 31, they would have flipped Oregon, Nevada, New Mexico, Kansas, and Wisconsin. That's 5. Am I missing something? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Heh. Yes. Okay, anyway. And the Democrats would have flipped Massachusetts and Maryland. So that would give Republicans a net gain of 3. I don't think that's correct, but oh well, I don't care. Now let's take a look at the House. Let's take a look at the House. Hopefully I can get this all up on frame. So the number of House seats flipped would go from R plus 10 to R plus 37, as Republicans end up winning 17 additional seats, as well as keep 3 of their seats. So here's just the list below. Republicans would have ended up keeping New Mexico's 2nd district. They would have kept Ohio's 1st, and they would have kept Washington's 3rd, whilst flipping 2 California seats, a seat in Colorado, a seat in Connecticut, a seat in Illinois, a seat in Indiana. They would have flipped Maine's 2nd district. Bruce Poliquin would barely get by Jared Golden. They would have flipped a single seat in Michigan's 7th. They would have won Minnesota's 2nd. They would have flipped all 3 Nevada seats, so they'd have all 4 Nevada seats under Republican control. They'd flip 2 North Carolina seats. They'd flip an Ohio seat. They'd flip all 3 Oregon seats, so all but 2 seats in Oregon would be red. They'd flip 3 seats in Pennsylvania. Alan Fung would have won in Rhode Island 2nd, and they'd win 2 seats in Virginia, the 7th and 10th. Hung Chow would have barely beaten Jennifer Wexton, and they would have flipped Washington's 8th, giving them a net gain of 37 seats for a grand total of 249 seats at the end of the day. A pretty large majority, a much healthier majority at the end of the day. And if I had to guess, people are probably going to be like, oh, look at this. We did so much without Donald Trump. Or, oh my God, we couldn't do this without Donald Trump. Probably both. But this is probably what the 2022 midterms would have looked like if it was a traditional red wave. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. This is the Chaotic One saying peace.